Today we're looking at chapter 8 in our Apologetics books. Last time we got together a couple weeks ago, I said we were kind of flipping the script a little bit. Up to now, we have been looking at objections people raise to Christianity and to believing in Christianity. Now, for the next half of the class, we're going to be looking at reasons why belief in Christianity is rational, reasonable, and acceptable. There are very good reasons to believe in that. And we're going to be taking a look at some of those as we go along. And today, as I said, we're going to be looking at the book of Genesis chapter 1, because we're going to start looking at the clues that God has left for all of us, not just Christians, by the way, but the clues that he has set out there, even for the unbeliever, to know that there is a God in the world. So if you want to turn, if you will, to Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1, we're going to look at that in just a second. But one kind of foundational fact that I want you to be aware of is, that we've kind of talked about, and I've mentioned before, but you really need to get this straight, and that is that there is no absolute proof positive that overcomes every objection to belief in God. Belief in God is ultimately always going to be a faith decision. And there are good reasons to make it, and we're going to be talking about those. But also the other half of that is also true. Belief that there is not a God is just as much a faith decision. There's no absolute, total, world-convincing proof one way or the other. And so just, kind of bear that in mind as we go along. And as I said, we're looking at clues today. Why should we believe in God? It's not like we just say, oh, I believe there's a God out there, and I make this leap of faith into the unknown, not knowing anything about it. We're going to look at clues and get some good ones today. And I want to start, as I said, with Genesis chapter 1, right at verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was out without form and void. Darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over it. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let's separate the waters from the waters." God made the expanse, and it separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse, and it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. There was evening and there was morning the second day. And then God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas, and God saw that it was good. And I'm also just going to jump down to verse 14, because this is kind of the clue we're looking for. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. Let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light to the earth, to rule over the day and the night, to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And then you can move over to Psalm chapter 8 and verse 3. Psalm chapter 8 and verse 3. And this is David, by the way, who is writing this. But David says in verse 3, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place, what is man? You are mindful of him, and the Son of Man, that you care for him." And then turn again over to Psalm chapter 19. Psalm 19, verses 1 and 2. "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge." All right, anybody see a theme in amongst those verses that I've just been reading? What's kind of my theme there? Or was the theme that we were looking at? Exactly. And even more than just looking at creation, what specific part of creation are we talking about? Sun and the moon, the heavens.
The heavens.
Yep, heavens declare the handiwork of God. That's exactly right. And this is the first clue that God gives all people, not just Christians, but this is the first clue that God gives that there is a God that exists. Now, saying that, let me be right up front. That doesn't say that you look at the stars, if you're an unbeliever, and you could say, oh, wow, there is a God, and it must be God himself and Jesus Christ. All it tells us is that there is a God, that there's not a leap of faith, or there is a little bit of a leap of faith, but that there has to be, from what we're seeing, some designer, some creator up there. So that is why, by the way, I told you to bring your physics books today, because clue number one is this: why is there something rather than nothing? If you're an atheist, you believe without any, you have to believe it on faith, but you believe that something came from nothing. You can go all the way back, if you want, to what the scientists say. Anybody want to take a guess? What is it that the scientists say was the beginning of everything?
The Big Bang.
The Big Bang, exactly. And the Big Bang, without getting into your physics handbooks, the Big Bang is basically, they say that there was a chunk of matter.
But what did the matter?
And it exploded. And it spread out, and from that explosion, everything we have around us today was created. But what's the question? Where did the chunk of matter come from?
Well, and B, who lit the match?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, or he indeed.
I was going to say they're not necessarily wrong. They just can't explain where the matter comes from.
Exactly, and that's why I always tell you that even while they're pointing out, well, you can't prove to me that there is a God beyond a shadow of a doubt, and it's all faith, I can point right back at them and say, you can't prove to me beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is no God, that there was just this chunk of matter. Where did it come from? Who lit the match that caused it to explode and to become everything that exists? And so, you think about that, and you ask that question, what caused it? We'll take another quick thought, too, because scientists will tell you that everything in the world is contingent on something else. And what that simply means is that for everything that happens in the world, something caused it to happen. So like, when you get up in the morning, you get up because the alarm rang, or for some other reason. What caused the alarm to ring? Well, you set the alarm the night before. When did you set the alarm the night before? Well, you set it and you went to bed. Like I say, everything that happens literally in the entire world, every second, has some previous cause. Law of contingency. That is standard issue scientific law.
First step, law of physics.
Mm-hmm.
And that plays right into it.
Right. And that's why when we get all the way back, as I said, to the Big Bang, they can't give you the original cause. The Big Bang has to be contingent on something happening, but they can't tell us what it was that happened. And the Big Bang has to be contingent on there being something there to go bang. They can't tell you where it came from. And so that is a clue right there, big clue, that there is a God. There is a designer, that there is a God who created that little piece. And by the way, I'm not trying to get into an argument here about whether the Big Bang is real or any theological thing along those lines. I'm just taking them at their word, that that was what started everything. And that's why I said, and why that in itself is a clue that there is a God. What does God say in the book of Genesis when we were reading it? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There was a creator, and if it starts with the Big Bang, he's the one that creates the little particle of whatever it was that went bang, and he's the one that caused it to do that. He's the original cause. And so right there you have a very good clue, a very solid clue that there is a God. This is not just, me sort of making up some fanciful tale. You got to really get back and ask the question and answer the question. Where did it come from? And what explains the Big Bang better? The idea that there is a God who created it and who caused it, or the idea of the atheist that there's nothing out there, that it just showed up one day and we can't tell you how, and that one day it decided to blow up. Can't tell you how. The idea of a God who is a designer and a creator makes more sense in this case to explain why there is something instead of nothing out here and around us. So there you go. That's your first clue, really, that there is something, that there is a God. Second one, this is the one I like. Keller calls it the cosmic welcome mat. And this is where you should have your physics books with you, but because Keller, and he doesn't go into a lot of physics, but he says there are 15 scientific constants in the world. And I think there are more than that, but there are 15 that are sort of basic foundational things. One of them would be the speed of light. One of them would be what's called the gravitational constant, meaning that gravity doesn't change. Gravity stays the same all the time. Otherwise, we'd be wandering around every day wondering when we're going to float for a while. But yeah, there's a gravitational constant. There's some other ones that have to do with, with energy constants. And why do I bring that up? Real simple. These things fall in a very, very precise range. All of you who've been through high school science know that they have measured the speed of light. It's like 186,200 and something miles a second is the speed of light. What you may not realize, though, is that speed is vitally important at that speed, because if it goes faster than that, much faster at all, then light changes property completely. And it doesn't do what it does for us now. And if it goes slower than that, it doesn't work either, because, we all hear about Einstein saying, his little theories and the rest of that. But his theories only work if the speed of light is constant, and if it's constant at precisely the speed it goes, because that's where energy is able to be formed into matter. Mass equals energy times the speed of light squared. I know. You don't even have to worry about knowing that or understanding it.
Equals MC squared.
Man, my brain's not here.
Well, and like I said, you don't really need to know all of the physics behind that. You just need to know, though, that if the speed of light is much different than the speed that we calculated it at, it doesn't make matter. And so you have to have it. It's got to be right at the constant that it's at. The gravitational thing is the same way. If the constant for gravity is either stronger, meaning it's pulling you down, it's going to be too heavy and we wouldn't be able to walk. And it doesn't take much of a shift in that constant to make it so heavy that you can, you're going to be nothing but kind of crawling around the ground. And by the same token, if it's lighter much, then it's not going to hold us to the ground enough in order to survive and in order to create. And so you got two constants that have to be within extremely tight tolerances in order for life to exist. And by the way, it's not just two. Like I said, there are 15 of these constants. And they all have to be within these very, very tight tolerances for life as we know it and as we understand it to have formed and to exist. And indeed, not just for life, but for matter to exist. So you don't need to go, like I said, your physics textbooks now, but if you look at what the scientists say, they will tell you that we're in, that it's a miracle that life does exist precisely here, because without all of these things working together at precisely the places they're at, can't happen. I think that if you, some of the mathematicians out there have done the calculations on what are the odds that all 15 of these show up exactly the right place at exactly the right speeds for exactly what has happened to happen. And it's one in some, I don't know how many trillion, that it would work, or that it would all happen that way. Basically, if you filled the entire Milky Way with quarters and you painted one yellow, what are the odds that you're going to be able to take your spaceship and go and pick exactly the one out of it? That's what the odds are that there would be life. And so again, what we have is another clue here that there is a God. Because if God is the creator, he brings something out of nothing, then God also designed it for life. Genesis chapter 1, he created the heavens and the earth. We talked about him creating the waters and the expanses of the heavens, the plants, the animals, created all life. We talk about the Psalms. We talk about David looking up, the Psalms declare the heavens declare the handiwork of God. What is it? Day and night pour out speech, and night pours out knowledge. That's David telling us God is in the stars and all that, pointing out to us. David is no physicist, but at the same time, his words are totally true, because the more we study the heavens and the earth and everything else, the more we realize just exactly how abnormal it is that there's life. And that's a very solid clue that there is a God. There was an outside cause. There is a God. And so, if you think about it this way, we're looking at this. We're looking at the things that we're talking about, how the tolerances are so tight that you kind of have to come to the conclusion there is a designer, that there's a God. Anybody here a poker player? Okay, and nothing wrong with that, by the way. But the reason that I bring that up is if you're sitting down with a guy, there's 5 of you, and you're playing poker, and the guy who's dealing 20 hands in a row ends up with 4 aces. What is your assumption based on that fact? Cheating, exactly. You're going to say cheating. Now, he may say to you, well, you know what? I've studied physics, and I know that the physics like to tell us that there's literally millions of parallel universes out there, and that in all these universes, something will happen in at least one of them that might not happen in any others. And this just happens to be my parallel universe, and I got 20 aces or 20 hands of 4 aces in a row. Wasn't cheating. And you're going to look at him and you're going to say, cheater. That's kind of what we're looking at when we look at this idea of the cosmic welcome mat. We look at it and we can say, well, there's all these parallel universes out there, and at least one of them, everything would have come together just exactly that it did, without any help from a God or anything else, and we would have had life, and we're it. No. The odds are such that it just does not work. It's just too negligible that it could happen that way. And not the least reason being that not all physicists even agree that there's all those parallel universes. That's more the Marvel theory of life. All right, so anyway, we have another good clue in the cosmic welcome mat there. There's another one that we don't think about, but regularity of nature. Nature is very regular. Have you noticed that every morning when you get up, there's a sun, and every morning or every night when you go to bed, there's a moon? Now, it may be different phases, different places, or all that, but every morning the same thing happens. That's basically the regularity of nature. And there are a lot of things out there that are regular that we count on. And if they weren't, we couldn't exist. grandmother, she likes her tea. Well, she did. She's passed away now. But every morning she would get up and she would put the kettle on and she would boil the water for her cup of tea. And she knew that every morning the water was going to boil. And she knew too that she had to set the flame at a certain level so that it got hot enough to boil, because she knew the boiling point of water was going to be the same yesterday as it is today, as it will be tomorrow. That's a regularity. And there is all, it never, nature never really changes on those things. That's another hint, another good clue that there is a God. The simple fact that things stay the same. Because ask yourself this question: if the boiling point of water changed every once in a while, what would that do to your life? I mean, you probably could adjust to it and get used to it. But the thing is that there's a lot of businesses, there's a lot of commercial industry that depends on water boiling at the same point all the time. Not the least of which is a nuclear power plant, which boils water to make steam, to turn turbines in order to bring us power and that. And if the boiling point of water is constantly fluctuating, you can't really have that. So if nature is fluctuating constantly, it doesn't have any regularity, you ultimately can't exist, and you won't. So one more good clue that we have there, that there is a God. One more to think about, and this one is not so much a scientific one, but I'll toss this out for a question. What's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? Pardon? Okay. Yep. Did you see the green flash? There you
Yes.
go. Okay. What about some of the rest of you? What else? What's something beautiful that really moves you? That
Rivers in Colorado.
ah,
and the
okay.
Rockies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It looked like a mirror. You could see. I mean,
that would be gorgeous. Some of the rest of you, what are some beautiful things? It doesn't necessarily have to be from nature, but yeah.
Ours was a sunrise.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be absolutely gorgeous. Now, why are these things beautiful? How do you know they're beautiful? Well, kind of, a little bit. You go out and you talk to the scientists, and the evolutionary people, the evolutionary biologists will tell you that when you go to San Diego and you see that beautiful sunset, it's because your ancestors were fishermen, and they would be out there, and it would be, a time when the fish were moving, and they knew it better than the other tribe down the road, and therefore they went out and they fished, and they got more fish than the tribe down the road, which ended up starving to death and passing away, while your ancestors who saw that and believed that it led to fish grew, and they were able to pass along their biological characteristics down the line while the other one didn't. And therefore, because of that, you think it's beautiful to see a sunset in San Diego, or a sunset like you saw in the mountains. Maybe that sunset was such that the evolutionary biologists would say it meant that there was good hunting in this place at this time. And so they would go and they got food and they were able to pass along their genetic code. Bingo. All of those are what evolutionary biologists would tell you, that really you have no idea of a concept of beauty, because beauty is a concept that does not exist outside of some biological urge and some chemical reaction within your brain. And by the way, they would say that that's why we get married, because we have some weird, we want to pass along our genes. And so we look for somebody to do that with, a man or a woman that we can mate and so forth. And the idea that our mate is beautiful to us has nothing to do whatsoever with actual standards of physical beauty. It has everything to do with what the chemical reaction in your brain is telling you about the chemical reactions in her brain, and that all of it is just preordained, and it's all ultimately basically designed for one thing, for you to pass along your genetic code. And that's it. And so what you think is beautiful has absolutely no grounding in reality whatsoever. It's just the chemical reactions in your brain planted there long ago by your ancestors as they were trying to pass along the genetic code that has led. That's a problem. Because, really, if we're going to say that, it doesn't work. But what's worse is that if what our brains tells us about morality or love or beauty is not real, if it's just a set of chemical reactions designed to pass on our genetic code, then the problem is, what is it that those evolutionary biologists' brains are telling them? They don't ask that question. They assume that they're rational thinking human beings who have unlocked the code, that understand evolutionary biology. Well, sorry guys, but if all the rest of us are stuck with nothing but passing down our genetic code because of something that happened long ago, your brains are the same way. You're wired the same way. You're just simply trying to pass along your genetic code the same way. And for you to sit up there and say, but we have broken out of the pattern, doesn't hold water. So we're back to the question. If there is something if there is beauty, and if it's, then it's got to be something that is created by God. It is something that we are looking for and that we catch glimpses of in a sunset, in a mountain lake, in a woman, in a piece of music, in a man. It's something that God has created within us because there's something that it's causing us to desire. When you see something beautiful, how long does the effect and the feeling last? Not very long. Usually it's not too long. And it leaves you wanting more. If you have a piece of music that you love to listen to, you listen to it, and the first time you hear it is absolutely beautiful, and you keep hearing it and keep hearing it. But it sort of gets familiar, and it starts to lose it, and you start to yearn for that feeling again. That's because God has planted within us a desire for beauty, and that there's something out there beyond us that gives us an idea of what beauty is. Now, I read again the book of Genesis. Where does he put Adam and Eve after he has created them, but before they fall? Garden of Eden, exactly. That is probably where our standard beauty comes from, in the sense that they were living in this garden, they were walking with God. It was perfect, it was beautiful, it was gorgeous, the whole creation. What does God say about everything he does on each one of those days? And he saw that it was good. He saw that it was good in the sense that it was beautiful, it was perfect, and that. And we lost that when Adam and Eve fell. And we are trying to get back to that beauty. That's part of the call that God has for us. And we get glimpses of it. We get flashes of it in this life, in nature, in people, in art. But it's because God had planted it. So if, again, we're talking to the scientists, we say to them, what better accounts for the idea of beauty and everything else we've talked about, all these clues? Is it that there is a God, or is it there isn't a God? And scientists themselves kind of get them stuck when they try and say there is no God, precisely because the best explanation, not total, complete, perfect proof, but the best explanation for the way things are, is that there is a God, one who created beauty, one who created regularity in science where we live so that humans could live and function and grow and adapt. He created for us a universe that's perfect in all of its scientific constants, precisely so life could thrive in this universe. Far better explanation to say there is a God, or a designer anyway, who created these things, than to say, no, there is no God, it's all just one giant cosmic accident. And that is, kind of like I said, these are the clues God leaves us very clearly, even to the unsaved, by the way, to say, yeah, there's a God, there is a designer, and call you to him and call us to him. Let me just read one quick quote. If we believe God exists, that gives us a reason for believing our cognitive abilities work, since God would make us able to form true beliefs and knowledge. The Big Bang regulates fine-tuning of constants. They're all easily explained. If God does not exist, all these things are inexplicable. But the view that there is no God would not lead you to expect them. No reason to believe your rational faculties work, and yet you still use them. Chapter 8, probably about halfway through the chapter. I can't give you a page number off the top of my head. Yeah. So the theory that there's a God who created the world accounts for the way things are far better than the belief that there is not. So let me just leave it with that for us today. Take away, if nothing else, just that thought that, when people try and say, well, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, there is a God, there isn't a God. If you think about it at all, that you almost have to come down on the idea that there is a God given the way the universe works and the way it is, and as opposed to blindly believing there is no God even given the way the universe and everything works. All right, well, let's close it for today then. Father, thank you for today.